Hi, my name is Keith, and welcome back to The Purpose Within. I apologize for not uploading the last few days. Been a little hectic, been a little busy with the holidays and stuff like that, so I apologize. Um, I didn't know exactly how I wanted to make my third video of the series, and was going over a few ideas in my head the last few days. I kind of want to start with how I got diagnosed with depression from the very beginning, at the age of 10. And what led up to that. And then I'm going to kind of slowly dabble into other topics. So I hope y'all stay tuned for that. Um, I think first I want to say thank you for the continued support of my channel and all you guys' continued advice and guidance on how to make this a little bit better and easier for me. So I do appreciate it. So without further ado, I want to address my depression. As some of you know, I was diagnosed at 10 years old with severe depression and anxiety. And I think what led up to that for me, for context, my parents worked a lot. I am a single child, only child, and my parents worked a lot to provide for the household. And for me, I never got a chance to really spend time with my parents when I was younger. Constantly working. My mother worked 3 jobs. My father worked all day. And I was alone a lot as a kid. Never had a chance to really spend time with my parents. So it kind of left me lonely, feeling alone for a lot of times. And I think the hardest part was trying to cope through that and trying to, um, I guess, make peace with it, if that makes any sense. My mother, like I said, worked 3 jobs, and all the time she would, go to the first job 3 in the morning, um, come home, get me ready for school, um, go to her second job, you know, stay there until I got out of school, come pick me up, take me home, make sure I was fed, and then go to her third job. And meanwhile, my father was working, 8 to 5 job, 8 to 6 job sometimes. He used to be a driver, so his time was very limited. But that being said, I never got a lot of chances to spend time with my family on, outside of like weekends and the holidays. But loneliness stepped in and crept into my life. And, I never had brothers and sisters, and, I never had, chances to hang out with anybody. We didn't have that many friends either. So, as a kid, that hits you a lot, and it hurts because, I can't talk to anybody. I can't be friends with anybody. That's rough on a kid. So, over the years, it progressively gotten worse. And, of course, going to school, being bullied and being made fun of, that added on to the depression, it added on to the anxiety. You're having, teachers question your education and whether or not you can make it in this world. I mean, as a kid, it was hard. It's hard to let people in and tell people what's going on in my head. I'm so quick to shut people off and stay in my own head 90% of the time, and it's hard to let people in. And for me, growing up, I just say to myself, if nobody was going to hang out with me, I just hang out with myself, be my own friend. And at the time, it gets lonely. You hardly see your parents, every day. You don't have any friends. It's so hard to have a normal life when you're always constantly alone by yourself, and it hurts. So for me, that's what kind of contributed to my depression, added on with being bullied and being made fun of, and it's hard. It was hard, and it was hard. I after so long, I've gotten used to it. I've gotten used to being by myself. And I used to being alone. And it's hard being alone in your own head when you have depression. So a lot of that stuff for me, uh, it hurt. Um, Last week, Monday, I had a psychology appointment, and my father attended the session. And that was the first time I've heard that man say "I love you" in over 30 years. And that was hard to accept because, one, I'm not used to my father saying it, and two, um, not having to hear it, you know, for a long time from your own father, it hurts. Um, it's another thing added on to my depression. Um, I think with depression, a lot of times, at least for me, I can attest for myself that I wanted the attention. I wanted somebody to see me. I wanted somebody to hear me, um, just for a few minutes, just to understand where I was coming from, to be not alone in my own head, just to somebody to acknowledge me. It was so hard to deal with because I've always felt like an outcast. I've always felt like no one really paid attention to me. No one really showed me the affection. No one really showed me the attention. And all that is a perfect storm to further your depression. At least it did for me. So during that time, I'm constantly going through that. I'm going through the bullying, the self-doubt, and it became overwhelming at that point in my life where I had those thoughts in my head. Now, I can't remember exactly my first thought or exactly where it came from, but I remember exactly how I wanted to die. And figured, being a bathtub, you cut your wrist, you bleed out, you're dead, you're done, you're gone, and that was it. And that's kind of what I wanted. And at the time, it was because I wanted the pain to stop. It was like this invisible pain that just kept sitting in my chest over and over again. It didn't stop. It kept going on every day. And I never knew exactly what it was because things like this weren't terms back then. It just wasn't talked about back in the day. A lot of it was taboo, And then of course there's the medical profession. A lot of people just really didn't believe that depression would hit someone, especially my age, so hard. Like, wait, you're 10 years old. Why are you depressed? What are you depressed about? How can you be depressed? Like, you're a kid. So these things were very taboo back in the day. And what was hard about it was accepting that I had an issue and I had a problem, and to find somebody to talk to. I couldn't go to my mom to talk about depression because she already dealt with her own depression at the time. And how do I put more on her plate and say, "Hey, mom, I have depression. Can you deal with it?" I didn't want to put that burden on her. And with my father, he didn't know about depression. He's just now in his 50s figuring out what depression is, what mental health is. So he's just now figuring this out. He saw what it was, but never to the full extent of what it can do and what it could lead to, to other things. So now my father was learning this, but he didn't know anything. And back in the day, it was very taboo almost. So I kept a lot inside as a kid. I kept the bullying inside. I kept the abuse inside. I didn't really tell anybody. I didn't talk to anybody because who would understand me? Already people don't want to talk to me. Already people don't want to acknowledge me. So what was the point? What was the purpose? And I say that to say that over time, that can really mess with your mental. That can really mess with how you feel and how you perceive yourself. And what it does is basically it shuts you off from the rest of the world. Because if no one's going to listen to me now, why would anyone listen to me later? So I've learned to carry it on my own. I carry my own weight. I carry my own burdens. I didn't want to pass on to anybody. So of course, getting older, coming down to Florida, going to new schools, new settings, new friends, new environment, and still kind of dealing with the same bullying, the same kind of treatment that I was in Connecticut, and trying to navigate myself through the minefields and try to fit in and understand how this is supposed to go. And again, over time, it just progressively got worse. And it's hard to tell people that you want to die. It's hard to tell people that you have something that's getting in your head and it's talking over and over again, and it wants you to do something you're going to regret. And it's not something that's simple that you can just take vacation or have it shut off or go outside and exercise. No, it's something that constantly eats at you. And as a kid, what was my outlet? Who can I go to say, hey, I need help? I didn't want to talk to my mom. My dad didn't understand. My friends definitely wouldn't understand at that time what I was going through. And then, after a while, you just start developing habits. You start lying. You start telling people, yeah, I'm sure, yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, I'm good. I'm fine. Yeah, just put a fake smile on my face or crack a few jokes to get them off my back so that way they never notice. Cry in silence, cry in secret so no one sees it. That eats at people. I don't care who you are. It eats at you every day, over and over again. Going through middle school, suppressing my emotions, getting through high school, and then, constantly, again, the same thing over and over again. It gets to the point where it's too overwhelming. And at the time for me, I didn't know, how to regulate my emotions. I didn't know how to do breathing exercises to help calm down my nervous system. I didn't know any of these things. I had to learn a lot of this on my own and figure it out as time went on. And like I said in my last video, I have good days, I have bad days. A lot of times now, especially, I'm having more good days. Thank God. But there's days where I'm on the edge, of the cliff, and I try to work on myself. I've been trying to work on myself, but life hits you, and it hits you hard sometimes, and then you have to figure out how can I get through? How can I get to the next day? How can I get to that light at the end of the tunnel? I was out to patients today, and my male patients, they're older. They don't. They're just trying to figure out what depression is themselves, and trying to understand that part of it. And they asked me today, like, when did this happen? For me, I say, hey, this happened. I was 10. I was officially diagnosed, but I was dealing with depression probably, even before that. Just didn't know what the word was. I just kept telling them, I'm just dealing with this pain that I can't describe. It's internal. How do you tell people that you're fighting yourself mentally? So, explaining things and, doing these videos, it's been helping me try to, not only to understand it, but to get my voice out there so others can understand as well that, for me, dealing with depression, I've always equated it to fighting prime Mike Tyson in my head. And I'm constantly getting beat down over and over again. And, obviously he's winning. It's Mike Tyson. And I'm getting up over and over again because I'm stubborn. I'm keep on getting up, but when does it stop? When does it get to the point where enough's enough? I don't want to get up anymore. I'm tired, and I'm having more of those days that I'm just really tired. You know, that's a rough thing for any man to say, that he's tired, because once he starts saying he's tired, he's checking out. He doesn't want to deal with the bullshit anymore. He doesn't want to associate himself with people anymore. He doesn't want to go outside anymore. He doesn't want to participate in events anymore. He just goes to work, comes home, eats, sleeps, and that is it. And that's where a lot of the problem is, because how can you live a normal life like that? We're constantly in this isolation over and over again, and you're not even bothering to taking the time to associate with others and talk to others about what's going on, and just locking yourself into a bubble. It's extremely detrimental to your health. I advise any man that goes through depression that you have to talk to somebody. I don't give a shit who it is. It could be your pastor, it could be your barber, it could be friend, it could be your mom, your dad, it could be a drunk at the local store, it could be a homeless dude, it could be a Girl Scout cookie representative, it could virtually be anybody, as long as you are talking to somebody. Men especially cannot lock shit up in a box and expect to live a normal life. Oh yeah, well, I'm just gonna put it in the back burner. Everything's gonna be fine. I'm not gonna worry about it. You can't do that. I've done it for many years, and it's led me down some dark places. So it's extremely hard to live a life like that where you're just not talking to anybody. For us as men, we're men. We're human. We have emotions too. We have feelings too. We go through shit too. So we can't keep bottling up emotions the way that we do and expect to live a normal life. It's just not feasible. Um, it's for men, for anybody really, when you suppress so much of your emotions and your feelings you're pouring tea into a teacup, eventually at some point it's going to overflow. Same thing with emotions and feelings. Eventually you're going to become overwhelmed. It's going to become too much and it's going to overflow. And the worst part about that is that I want to say 90% of the time is going to lead you to do something very extreme, whether it's alcoholism, whether it's suicide, whether it's taking drugs or overeating or oversex or anything like that. Is going to constantly be something very excessive and something very extreme. And once you fill that teacup and it starts to overflow, that's it. Us as men, we do that so much all the time, where we suppress our emotions and our feelings, and it's like a teacup. It's going to overflow, and you're going to do something very extreme. It's going to happen. I don't give a shit who you are. You can be the toughest dude on this planet walking. It doesn't matter. Everyone got emotions, and you got feelings. I test for myself is that because I've done it so much, where I suppress a lot of my emotions, where it could be the smallest thing that triggers me. It could be me at Costco's and I drop a thing of cookies and now I'm having a panic attack in the parking lot over some fucking cookies. And that's not a normal thing. Me going to Starbucks and then I just drop my coffee. And now I'm freaking out in my garage for 5 minutes, trying to think what the fuck am I gonna do. And that rage and that anger boils up, and then we get to the point where we do something stupid. Again, us as men, I know that we have been programmed to always suck it up, to deal with it, to man up, and everything in between. Because we're taught this as children, we're taught this as kids. We ride our bikes, we scrape our knee, we go run to our father and say, "Hey, Dad, my knee hurts," and they're like, "Oh, it's something, a boy, deal with it." Then they get the iodine, they put that shit in your knee, and then your fucking knee burns all the way off. You know, I don't want to make this into a pissing match with my father, but to be open with everybody, me and my father never had, um, I would say, a very father and son like relationship. Especially those first 10 years of my life, I thought my father was a dick. And I told him to his face that he was a dick. And, I said it. And of course, he didn't hit me. He didn't do anything. He just kind of acknowledged it and walked away. And then for a few years afterwards, he became my friend more than he was a father. And it worked for a time. But, man, when I look back at it, he did very bare minimum stuff. And maybe I just didn't see it. Maybe it's kind of my fault to some degree, but man, me and him always butting heads, and there's a lot of times I thought he never saw me, or would acknowledge me. Um, I remember I was 17, about to be 18 years old, and it was my first stint of being in a mental hospital at the time. And mind you, I was the one that wanted to go. I was the one that wanted to check myself in, because at the time I really wasn't okay. And my mom, she was there with me. She's crying. She's upset, and that was one of the hardest things I think I had to do. Was acknowledge, one, that I needed help, and two was to say, hey, I need to go to a mental hospital because I'm not okay. I was in a dark place, and I knew the reaction from my mother and what I was going to get, but to know that I didn't hear really from my father at that time. He never really said anything after I came out. He just asked if I was okay, and I was like, yeah, I'm okay, but never really acknowledged it, never really said anything afterwards, and just kind of brushed it off. I'm like, damn, man, like, I'm over here in a mental hospital. I'm over here struggling with depression. Why aren't you talking to me? Why aren't you sitting down with me and asking me, hey, are you really okay? What's happening? Why is my son depressed? What can I do to help you with your depression? Who do I gotta beat up, to help you with your depression? And I never really got that from my father. Looking back at it, he'll acknowledge it within reason, but never to the point where, really going above and beyond, asking me what did I need, and what can I do to help you. I never really got that from my father. Looking back at it now, it's just that loneliness feeling crept up again. And I would admit, for a very, very long time, even, somewhat now, I've always felt lonely. I've always had my parents in the household, regardless of whether or not they worked a lot, which they did. But I've always felt alone. I would have friends, but I've always felt alone. I would have girlfriends, and everything else. I have a fiance. I'm going to get married in a few months. And yet, I still feel alone. It's a crazy feeling to have, knowing that you have a household of people, yet you still feel alone. And I will admit, I'm not used to receiving gifts. I'm not used to receiving love either. So like, these things are very hard for me to accept, and maybe that's partly my fault that I'm not used to accepting these things. But to know to hear and to never really hear my father say I love you for many years, to never really truly feel like I've been loved other than my mother, you know, those feelings right there of loneliness and not feeling like you're loved enough, that really affects anybody, especially for somebody like me that's very sensitive to things. You know, I never could shake that feeling. You know, that was one of the things growing up that when I felt lonely, and then when I would get just like a little bit of attention, I would overabuse it. You know, and I would self sabotage a lot of relationships that way because I would cling a lot. You know, I would hold on to something even though it was like toxic. And I knew, but it's like, no, but I love that person. I love that thing. I don't want to let it go because that's the only thing that really made me happy. I gotta hold on to that. And man, when you do that for the wrong people, it can really fuck up your mental. And it did for me for a while. Um, I think for me, and I will be honest with you guys, um, with my depression and my anxiety, I feel like the one thing, if anything else, I can pass on to maybe younger generation or to anybody else dealing with it is that as much as we're not in our heads, no, I would say as difficult as it's going to be to find help, resources, hope, sometimes I can say that you're gonna get the help because as lonely as I felt, as lonely as I was at the time, I still had support system in my corner. I just had to allow it in. I just had to accept the help. I had to put aside my pride and my ego to allow myself to get help. And I know for men it's very hard to not only allow others in, but to ask for help. You know, for men, it's, you know, we're always trying to be like the macho man and trying to be like a tough guy. And, you know, this world will beat you down. You know, there's nothing wrong with asking for help. There's nothing wrong with going to a friend, going to a family member, or whoever, just say, hey, I need somebody to talk to. I just need some help. So, very happy with myself that I am doing this. If you would ask me this 6 months ago, I wouldn't have done this. I wouldn't have opened up myself to the world and tell them my depression and tell them my story and tell them about my suicide. There had been no way. You know, now I can feel comfortable enough to share my story and to get my voice out there. You know, and this is still hard for me. I'm still learning, but I'm just very happy I can get to this point in my life where I'm doing this now. This is a long time coming, and then this took me a very long time to get comfortable to share this with others. You know, for a lot of men out there, it's not something that they're comfortable with. But for me, it's liberating to some degree. I can finally open up and talk to people about depression and hope that I can share my story with others and hope that they listen. Hope that I can help somebody. If I can help one person out there come off their ledge, I did something. I did something right. And there's quite a few people that need help. There's quite a few people that have depression, anxiety, some worse than others. And if I can be the go-between to help somebody else, if I can be the voice of reason and talk somebody off that ledge, I did something right. And uh, I went through a lot in my life. I didn't think I was going to be here, to be honest with you. To know that I am here now, and I can share my story and find new purpose in life. This truly means a lot to me. So that's it, guys. I'm going to share more with you guys in the coming weeks. I have a video coming this Friday, and yeah, I'm going to continue sharing my story. I hope it reached the right people. Hope y'all enjoyed it. We'll be back Friday, hopefully, and see you guys next time. Thank you.